See, I call this look the Easter Bunny if the Easter Bunny was a lesbian with a sword. So essentially just me, but with rabbit ears and the compulsion to hide eggs. What exactly does the Easter Bunny do? Spring can mean a lot of things. The renewal of nature, birdsong, and a regiment of bunnies armed to the teeth. Because if you're anything like me, and let's face it, if the algorithm has recommended this video, you probably are a sword nerd like me. The first thing you imagine when someone says bunny is not cute soft creature, but cute soft creature about to hunt you down with an axe or a sword. I kind of lost control of these bunny ear quotes. So what, when, where, and for the love of everything fluffy, why? Where did the bunny with a sword or, you know, just violent intent come from? Let's hop into that rabbit hole, but with a sword.
There he is. Where? There. What, behind the rabbit? It is the rabbit.
So it all starts in the margins, like the literal margins of medieval manuscripts, because we've all seen them, unless you're not on the medieval meme side of social media, in which case, just to catch you up, we have giant snails, monkeys playing bagpipes, nuns collecting things I can't show you on YouTube, and yes, rabbits doing unspeakable things. While we may be slightly tempted to have a slight preference for bunnies with swords on this channel, these raging habits have all kinds of weapons, from clubs and axes to bows and arrows, and they also seem to be able to, you know, ride other creatures, other fantastic creatures like a snail. Snails are very popular as a riding device in medieval manuscripts, and organize amongst themselves to do fun collective activities such as turning the tables and hunting down humans for sport. Or, you know, in more innocent activities, cooking. But are they cooking humans? Maybe. Who in their right mind? No, I mean, let's think about this for a second. Who in their right mind looks at a rabbit in the medieval period and goes, hey, Chad. Chad is a medieval name, okay. What if I drew this rabbit with an axe and a murderous glint in his eye? Well, looking at the wider picture of marginalia can actually help us here. Scholar Lucy Freeman Sandler explores the significance of this marginalia and the fact that when we think of it, we don't necessarily think of all illustrations in the margins of an illuminated manuscript. We think about the ones that are a little weird, a little naughty, a little completely unhinged, and definitely the ones where you wouldn't expect them to be illustrating what is usually a religious text or some kind of very serious text, something that was serious enough for somebody to actually spend quite a lot of money commissioning and somebody to spend an unimaginable amount of hours to, you know, just like putting together and copying, you know, before the printing press was widely in circulation. The standard notes about different normal everyday actions performed by all kinds of strange creatures, including animals and animal hybrids. So Sandler says, such actions are often played out in a world whose main feature is that it is topsy-turvy, a monde renversé in various ways and to various degrees. Some of the mechanisms involved include, first, role reversal, the rabbits hunting the hunter, the mice stringing out the cat. Second, vast amounts of parody, the fox preaching to the chickens or engaging in other Renardian activities, or apes aping every imaginable kind of human conduct. Third, figures manifestly human or humanoid, or at least hybrid human, including in socially inappropriate acts. And finally, figures in physically improbable or impossible actions or situations, whether the actors are human, animal, or hybrid. So if we focus in on the rabbit, it would make sense that the rabbit, a creature we usually associate with the hunted, would actually be at the top of the food pyramid in the topsy-turvy monde renversé world of the medieval manuscript margins. The rabbit today usually holds symbolism around innocence and overall cuteness, so there could be an element of subversion from that point of view. But if we also go by medieval context of reading the rabbit metaphorically, do not read your rabbit literally. We've been through this. You can't read your rabbit literally, okay? Rabbit could be regarded as a symbol of cowardice, which would make it pretty subversive to have them instead be brave enough to stick it to the man and stick sharp weapons in the man. So you're probably thinking at this stage, okay, problem solved. The medieval period was weird, they had a weird sense of humour, and we can rest easy knowing that these murderous bunnies will stay firmly ensconced in the past. But then the 19th century got involved. And the weaponized rabbits, that was bound to happen. And the weaponized rabbits persisted in a tradition of 19th century people being absolute weirdos about everything. And I mean, to be fair, not just 19th century, early 20th century as well. Basically, can the Victorians and Edwardians be normal about anything? No, they can't. Because when I came across this card, it felt like a bit of a slightly creepy one-off at first. I mean, to be honest, I brought this up on myself because I was looking for a very on-brand vintage Easter cards to send, and I got more than I bargained for, because I found, like, what is this? Like, it just looks like somebody mashed up like vintage fin de siècle aesthetics with revolutionary girl lieutenant. Like, I hope I'm not the only one seeing it. But then as I explored more, it felt like everywhere I looked, bunnies in pastel military uniforms riding hens were pelting us with eggs launched by cannons. And to be fair, these are not even the weirdest or more threatening cards. Let's give it up for these 3 rabbits smoking eggs filled with flowers. I don't even know what's going on here. And now we gotta wonder, is there something about these rabbits they're not telling us? Like, I mean, what is going on here? Why on the 2 edges of history are we finding these rabbits with swords again? I had to look into some answers before it was too late, or before Easter came and went, because, to be honest, I'm just not great at posting seasonal topics on time. Excuse me. I'm literally surrounded by packing boxes, and some of them are just giving up right now. So initially I thought it was the Victorians' fault, because, to be fair, when something weird happens, I kind of tend to blame it on the Victorians being absolutely unhinged. And in some way I was right, because not only did they launch a tradition of weird Easter cards that continued well into the Edwardian period, they probably were also at the origin of Easter as we know it today, pretty much like Christmas. I mean, the Victorians pretty much reinvented Easter and Christmas, but also did other weird things like being obsessed with ankles and death. So the Victorians were probably actually the first in treating Easter like an actual celebration of spring that was actually quite positive and festive, rather than a rather austere commemoration as it had been in the past, you know, from a European Christian perspective. Cue the sudden arrival of pastels, fluffy chicks, and also a whole new accessible way of expressing your springtime joy, sometimes by a questionable imagery. Because with the advent of the penny postage rate in the 1840s in Britain, a sudden new avenue of celebratory possibilities will open up to express your love of Easter in a cheap card you can make yourself, or, you know, buy and send for not very much at all. And with the rabbit as symbol making its way to British celebrations of Easter in the 1880s, if not before, its representations got mixed up in the weird world of extremely weird greeting cards. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love these rabbits dressed to duel like they're in a lesbian shoujo manga, but, you know, also, why? But also, if you like pastels and dueling, you should check out my comic Girls' School of Knighthood, because it had lots of girls with swords dueling and not a single bunny in sight. But to wider extent, to understand the weird, morbid, dark humor tone of these cards, we have to look at not necessarily what is being shown on these cards, but their format and social meaning as cards. Just like marginalia had a specific function that allowed for topsy-turvy quirkiness. When you step back and look at Victorian then Edwardian greeting cards in general, they're all over the place in terms of tone, with a lot of enthusiasm about using them as a new means of communication for pretty much everything. But especially, you know, like the big celebrations like Christmas, St. Valentine's, Easter, Halloween. Oh god, I don't even want to know what the Halloween Victorian and Edwardian greeting cards look like. A Museum of London blog post by documentation officer Annie McCulloch provides some interesting insights on this via the exploration of Victorian Christmas cards. She outlined that increasing competition around these cards led to increased desire to stand out by manufacturers, but there are also signs of a particular fascination at the time with animals doing human things. So she writes, going back to novelty cards, among animals, dogs, cats and rabbits were quite popular, as can be seen in the collection, the Museum of London collection, which you should check out. Often wearing oversized bows and in festive settings. This theme could be reflective of the everlasting British fondness for pets. It's also said that cards with humanized animals in everyday scenarios were primarily meant for children, but they enchanted adults too. In 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, and this could have influenced some designs for such cards as well. So it is further theorized in the article that as your traditional cute seasonal cards became very widespread, you'd maybe want to stand out more as a manufacturer, but also as a card sender. with satirical and absurdist humour scenes. And this works well with the excitement of a suddenly very accessible and new medium, almost creating completely new communication language and self-referential humour that you would get if you were sending and receiving these types of cards often. Like, these cards with completely absurd or kind of like almost like gruesome scenes are in a way kind of funnier if you're also somebody who's been receiving a bunch of really kind of run-of-the-mill vanilla greeting cards. What I'm saying is, these cards were to the Victorians and Edwardians what memes are to us today. And sometimes some of that is going to become so self-referential and just like such a deep cut that it's going to look completely incomprehensible a few centuries from now. Like, just imagine a historian trying to work out what the Minions memes are all about. I mean, all I can say is good luck. But what now? Now that the brutal, weaponized bunny has gone from medieval marginalia to Edwardian Easter greeting cards, what remains of his storied legacy? Well, it turns out it's now a fully fledged trope in itself, definitely popularized by the killer bunny from the Monty Python and the Holy Grail film that came out in 1975. But to be fair, the trope also expands into a general fascination with the idea of cuteness mixing with violence, and the idea of a character you wouldn't expect to be able to wield arms or generally exhibit combative behavior, proving you wrong. And while yes, this is often played for laughs in popular media when it comes to violent bunnies, with a preference for, the smaller and fluffier they are, the more brutal they get, there's some interesting characterization that can come from that, with sometimes some interesting intersections with gender. You thought you were gonna get through a whole video without me talking about gender? Well, no, because it's everywhere, like swords. That's the whole point of the channel. So Judy Hopps in Zootopia is an interesting example because she's shown to undergo strenuous training to become a cop that was originally conceived and meant for animals who were far larger than her, and she overcomes the odds nevertheless, and that definitely blends into a lot of discourse in the idea of people underestimating her because of her cuteness. Well, because of like how cute bunnies are in general, how they're stereotyped by other animals, and definitely kind of delves into lots of stereotypes that can also be associated with gender. And like Judy often like fights back against that throughout the course of the movie. And the character of Usagi Tsukino in Sailor Moon is also interesting because her entire name is really a whole pun around the folktale of the moon rabbit in East Asian folklore. And it could have been just left at that, but this being said, there's quite a lot, especially at the start of the series, portraying her as this ditzy crybaby, but who comes into her own as a leader and a magical girl, effectively subverting the metaphorical bunny trope. But sometimes a bunny with a sword is literally just that, like the protagonist of Usagi Yojimbo, a 1990s comic book series by Stan Sakai. The main character, Miyamoto Usagi, is a ronin and also a rabbit. In a universe where it's Edo-era Japan, but everyone is animal. Sakai drew his inspiration for him from legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, and the comic book series has benefited from a recent adaptation into an animated series for Netflix, where Yuichi Usagi is the protagonist is also a samurai rabbit, descended from the original Miyamoto Usagi, but in 26th century Japan, because then you can have samurai and cool robots. I mean, Samurai Jack has established that this is objectively a cool concept. And there isn't really anything in Stan Sakai's original concept for the character, for his original Miyamoto Usagi, that shows anything about specifically wanting to subvert that trope or play it for laughs. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting to think about the way in which we might kind of ascribe characteristics of violence or innocence to particular characters and, make them worthy or not worthy of wielding a sword. Interesting about all of this is the idea of how it relates to these kind of things in the margins that are kind of exploring these kind of wild ideas, but also kind of making social commentary in themselves. So this medieval historian, Michael Camille, talked about the idea of the edge in medieval art. So this idea of you don't only have illuminated mantras, but you have these strange hybrid animals in kind of the kind of architectural details of cathedrals and cloisters. You have all these different strange things happening on the margins. When you're on the margins, you don't have that kind of pressure in the sense of being the central tech. You can explore things that are a little bit different, a little bit strange, and maybe make you think about the perceived social order of things. So you can see that in medieval manuscripts, but to be honest, there's probably something to be said about how greeting cards could have served that purpose as well. It's not like this big official document, it's this kind of little bit of fun through something that's meant to be ephemeral. Even though it's all kind of humorous and played up for laughs, there is something behind that about trying to explore and subvert ways of, looking at who can be armed or not. And to me, that is pretty interesting because there's still a lot to be explored from that point of view in terms of the general perceptions that we have, not about animals with swords, but, about humans with swords. I work a lot with the idea of subverting and challenging perceptions around women with swords because there are these preconceived notions. So all I'm saying is that next time you see a bunny with a sword, think of the gendered and social implications of that, beyond satirical humor alone, but also maybe make a run for it. Thank you for jumping into the rabbit hole with me on this one. Honestly, it was a little bit wild, but I had lots of fun. Something else that we wouldn't necessarily associate with fighting or general weaponry is the fan, and I've made a whole video around the kind of history of the fan used as a weapon. So you can check that out somewhere here. If you like this video, please like and do consider subscribing, or the Easter Bunny will come and, well, not challenge you to a duel, but maybe have a strong word with you about lurking on a channel whose content you enjoy. In between uploads, or if you're done looking through the archive, you can check out my webcomic, Girls Called Knighthood, all about this bard who becomes a knight and subverts expectations in a way. It's all connected. You can also check out my podcast, Bustles and Broadswords, all about subverting our expectation of who fought throughout history, because on it I explore the different histories and legends surrounding women with swords. In the meantime, stay safe with lovers, and see you in another video.